Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is the end times Elijah already came. For those people who hold to a futurist eschatological view and are looking for a future coming of the prophet Elijah, I wanted to share with you some verses that I will submit to you are proof that Elijah already came, and he came in the first century. I have been mentioning the book The Return of Christ, Why Are We Still Waiting by Pete and Rachel Rue. And in this book, there is a section called Day of the Lord Signs. And in this section, they actually have a chart that puts together some really great verses from both the Old Testament and the New Testament that I believe are absolutely irrefutable proof that the prophet Elijah already came. So let's look first to Malachi, where people get this prophecy from. Malachi 4:5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Okay, so that is an end times promise that Elijah the prophet is going to come before the day of the Lord. Then we have in Matthew 11, verses 13 and 14, for all the prophets in the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come. Who said that? Jesus said that. Matthew 17, verses 10 to 13. And the disciples asked him, then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come? He answered, Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. Now I want to point out to you here that Jesus is saying that the scribes did not recognize John the Baptist as Elijah, just as many, many people, and I would say most people in the dispensationalist point of view, do not recognize that John the Baptist was Elijah, even though Jesus himself said it. And just as the Pharisees did not recognize John the Baptist as Elijah, they didn't recognize Jesus as their Messiah as well. Now, I came across this very interesting blog post by David Jeremiah that I thought that I would share with you some of it to show you exactly what I am talking about. And this is called Will Elijah Return During the Tribulation? And he said, let's see. Oh, we'll just start at the beginning. I'm not going to read the whole thing, though. I will link it in the description if you want to read the whole thing. Someone has said that imitation is the highest form of flattery. It also can be a form of deception. Ever since Satan's fall from heaven, he has counterfeited God's power in an attempt to deceive mankind. During the end times, Satan's deception will escalate to include imitation of God's signs and prophecies. The prophet Elijah will return, but a con man also will rise to prominence and confuse many people. So just from this paragraph alone, what we can see is that David Jeremiah thinks that we're still in the end times, despite the fact that the apostles said multiple times that they were in the end times, and he does not believe that the prophet Elijah has returned because he says the prophet Elijah will return. Okay, let's just read on. Understanding the Bible's account of Elijah's past ministry and prophesied return will help us distinguish God's true prophet from the coming impostor. So according to David Jeremiah, Elijah, when he comes back, is going to be confused with, a false prophet will try to confuse people into thinking that they are Elijah the prophet. Okay, I'm not going to read all of this. Here we go. A prophecy in Malachi 4:5-6 indicates that Elijah will return in the last days. It says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers. Keep that verse in your mind, okay? But Revelation 13:11-18 warns of a false prophet, the beast from the earth, who will deceive people by counterfeiting Elijah's miracle of fire. According to verse 13, the false prophet performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Anyone familiar with Elijah's ministry and Malachi's prophecy will draw a connection to Elijah when they see the false prophet's supernatural fire. However, the false prophet's power will come from Satan rather than God. I think it's really important to point out here that it says that anyone familiar with Elijah's ministry and Malachi's prophecy will draw a connection to Elijah when they see the false prophet's supernatural fire. But I do not understand for the life of me how David Jeremiah himself did not draw a connection from what Jesus said about who Elijah was. Because if you notice, you will notice I checked the entire blog post, and unless I missed it somewhere, David Jeremiah did not refer to any of the verses that show the blatant connection between Elijah and John the Baptist. So again, he even showed the Malachi verse. Where is that one? So he shared with you Malachi 4:5-6. Now I've only read 5 to you, verse 5, but I'm going to read verse 6 to you in a minute. So he did share that one, the very first one that I shared with you. He talked about that. Yet he completely skipped over these two other verses that we have in which Jesus is telling them that John the Baptist is Elijah. So keep that in mind, because we're going to go to some other verses that really you cannot deny this. I don't understand how people like David Jeremiah miss this. I honestly cannot. But anyway, they do, so let me show you. Isaiah 40, verse 3. A voice cries, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God." So that was the Old Testament prophecy. Next we have Matthew 3:3. For this is he, and they're speaking of John the Baptist, for this is he who was spoken of by the prophet Isaiah when he said, "The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight." So right here we have, it is saying, this is he, this is the prophet Elijah. They're talking about John the Baptist. There's no denying it. They're saying outright that this is Elijah. And yet, as I just showed you in that blog post from David Jeremiah, didn't even mention this verse at all, because he says that there's going to be a future return of the prophet Jeremiah in the quote end times. Why he did not include these verses, I don't know. Is it just because it didn't fit in with his eschatological view? That's my guess. Next, Malachi 3:1. This is an Old Testament verse. Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple, and the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. Behold, he is coming, says the Lord of hosts. And then we have Matthew 11:10. This is he of whom it is written, "Behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you." So again, this is blatantly saying, this is he. So why is David Jeremiah looking for a future return of the prophet Elijah? Malachi 4:6. And this is, remember when I told you to, where's that blog post at? Remember when I said to you, remember that he shared this, verse 6, where it said, "And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers." So he included this, right? So let's show you. And he will turn the hearts of fathers to their children, and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. So this is the verse that David Jeremiah shared in his blog post, okay? And he just left it at that and then jumped to Revelation 13. Here's what he left out. Luke 1:17. And he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready for the Lord a people prepared. You cannot miss that John the Baptist is the fulfillment. And I'm just going to share one more comparison with you because I think that this is enough, like honestly. And it frustrates me to no end that someone like David Jeremiah, it says on his blog post that he's been in the ministry for 40 years. Yet how does he miss this? 2 Kings 1:8. They answered him. He wore a garment of hair with a belt of leather about his waist. And he said, "It is Elijah, the Tishbite." So then let's go to Matthew 3:4. Now John wore a garment of camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey. And then we even have a second one in Mark 1:6. Now John was clothed with camel's hair and wore a leather belt around his waist and ate locusts and wild honey. I hope that you are able to see these obvious connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament that somehow David Jeremiah and a lot of other dispensationalists completely leave out when they're talking about some future coming of the prophet Elijah. They're waiting for a future coming of the prophet Elijah because it is a sign of the Lord's coming. Well, my friends, we have right here proof positive that the prophet Elijah already returned in the first century at the very beginning of Jesus's ministry. And here we are in 2025. There is no reason to be waiting for his return. It already happened. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.